All right, and we're back. It is still Friday. It is 4:20 in the afternoon. Didn't set that up on purpose. Friday, May 8th. We're going to finish the second part now of my horror script set in Scotland with a cursed Scottish lake. And I'm not going to try to do a stupid Scottish accent. At least, I can't promise you I won't try, but I'll try not to. We've had some disturbing moments already, although this is kind of a slow moving story. We've seen the Druids fight against the Romans in the beginning, in the first 2 pages, which was a thing. I believe the Roman army did occupy parts of what is now Scotland. We learned about some other Druid stuff and their ancestors and how secretive of a culture it was. I still don't really have enough knowledge to speak on what the Druids really represented. I don't know, man. We even went back to my obsession with cannibalism because I seem to speak about cannibalism all the time. And I listened to a podcast in between after I finished the first part, and I'll share it. It was pretty good. There's two authentic Scottish ladies, and they were talking about Scottish folklore, somewhat about Sawney Bean, but a lot of people think it's just one of those modes of propaganda, possibly. Maybe there was a similar story to Sawney Bean, the cannibal who lived in a cave, and he would rob people, unsuspecting passerbys who happened to come across his cave. And I think there was some clan of cannibals associated with that folklore. Was it really the true story of it all? Yeah. It's like any other method of folklore. It can become propaganda to serve another agenda. New Jersey has a Jersey Devil. Maryland has the Blair Witch. I'm sure there's other stuff around the Donner Party out in the Pacific Northwest or wherever that was. The Donner Party and other instances of cannibalism. And whenever you think of atrocities that occurred back in the 1800s, maybe that's what leads to a lot of horrific stories and folklore. The Salem witch trials, I'm sure people go there as a type of a haunted history to kind of get some of those vibes. It's a very important story. We learned that in grade school. Even in Catholic school, I think we learned about the Salem witch trials. Yeah, I like this stuff. When I started writing this series, I didn't know I was going to write so many horror scripts, but maybe that's inside of me trying to come out. That I do appreciate gore and witchcraft type of stuff. Not that I want to actually practice any of that shit because it's too freaky at that point, but I'm just an observer. I can observe some of the interesting historical folklore involved with witchcraft and demonic possession and how psychedelics might play a role in that. Now, there was a theory that maybe the townspeople in Salem were, I don't know, eating something that had this mold on it, and it might have made them hallucinate that these people were witches, but I don't know. I don't really know if I buy that, because they were burning witches and having that kind of mania in Europe throughout, the Middle Ages and beyond. Probably it was a thing, sadly, throughout human history. Regrettably, yeah, human beings, when they don't understand something or they feel threatened and that fight or flight instinct kicks in. This woman can read, burn her, she's a witch. I think there's a movie that pokes fun at that. I don't remember what I'm thinking of. Burn the witch. So yeah, it's not like I've ever wanted to really personally experience these things, but from an outsider type of window seat, like I'm riding by in a car, then I'd probably be interested in it from that type of as an observer. But the shamanic thing's different. I'm interested in the shamanic history, the ancient ways of healing, and you could say there's a witchcraft element to that, a pagan type of history. Maybe the druids could kind of be compared to shamans of after them. I don't know. I'm not up on this shit. I'm more interested in this shamanic thing because it's about healing people and how one person in the tribe is trained since childhood because they think they can communicate with the spirits in the afterlife, in the other dimension, break on through to the other side. I'm very interested in that, and I would like to actually meet actual shamanic people, like Hamilton Morris did in some of his videos. Yeah, I think there's really a lot to learn from that. Or it's all bullshit. But either way, it's interesting. From as a writer, it's very interesting. As a writer, as somebody who wants to get into the movie business and actually see these screenplays made and be a consultant, because I don't think I can direct this, but I would be a consultant to try to get my vision out there to make this as good as it can be. If you're going to do it, you might as well do it to the best of your abilities in anything you do in life. So I don't think that's why I don't want to direct any of my own scripts, because I don't think I could do a good job as compared to somebody who's been doing it for a long time, or even a young director coming out of college or film school, and they got that motivation to make their first big film. Of course, they're going to be way more able than I am. I don't know how to do anything when it comes to film, directing, cinematography, any of that stuff. So, of course, I just want to see these things be the best they can be so they can leave a legacy. I think that's a good motivation to work with a good team of people to bring this to reality. Like I said in the first part, to scare even the most hardcore, tough, macho women or men and to scare the shit out of these people. I think that's a good motivation. And I don't know what else to say, really. Should I just start reading this at this point? I would say, yeah, my connection to Scotland is purely based on media. There's been a lot of bands. One of my favorite bands is Churches, and I think they're like a brilliant electronic poppy band. I fell in love with them a couple of years ago, or longer than that. I took a road trip once to Maryland, and all I listened to was Churches, like the whole way. It was like just nonstop, repeat, repeat. It was so good. But there's Sparrow in the Workshop, Phantom Band. I went down these rabbit holes. You learn about a couple bands in the Glasgow scene. There's like, today there's some like post-punk bands associated with Scotland, Ireland that are very good. I'm not up to date with the Glasgow scene. I don't know any of the new stuff that's out. I just feel like so much good music comes from there, man. I don't know. I could do a quick search. Some of the best musicians that come out of Scotland, best bands. I'll put bands. I kind of want to say Annie Lennox too, but I'm not sure if she came from Scotland. Best bands from Scotland. And then I'll search for best artist, best bands from Scotland. Well, I'm not a big fan of Belle and Sebastian. Jesus and Mary Chain, don't really know them either. Oh yeah, Cocktail Twins. they're in my top 20 bands, definitely. I went down their discography a couple years ago. Cocktail Twins, love them. They're in my top 20 bands, like maybe even my top 10. Really big fan of, they kind of started gothic and then they just went this ethereal music ambient that's you can just escape to, and the vocalists are like from another planet, man. Mogwai, I've heard of, yeah, okay. Who else? I don't really know these bands. I've heard of the Twilight. Excuse me. I've heard of the Twilight Sad. I was supposed to listen to their new album, but I never did. Jerry Rafferty? All right, never knew that. So, all right, that's pretty interesting. So I'm sure, yeah, there's a lot of other stuff that Scottish people could school me into some of the real Scottish artists over the last couple decades. But I was a big fan of a lot of those bands. Eurythmics, I think is, yeah. They're listed on another thing I'm looking at right now. Snow Patrol, I never really got into. Paolo Nutini, I've heard of him. Exploited, I think they're kind of an anarchist punk band, but I could be wrong. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to look at this. If I could go anywhere in the world right now, I would go to Scotland, even though I'm a warm weather guy. I just feel like Scotland is such a cool place. I would probably just end up living there because it's like, I don't know, it's got this magical, mystical quality to it. I don't know. Bert Jantz, I've heard of him. I think he was in Pentangle, wasn't he? Pentangle, that was the last band I kind of got obsessed with. They had really good musicians in that band, and I think that was a name I remember. Bert Jantz, Danny Thompson, Jackie McShee was the vocalist, John Renborn, Terry Cox on drums. I don't know if they're Scottish. They were formed in London. But yeah, maybe. All right, so Herbert Jantz, was a Scottish folk musician, founding member of Pentangle, born in Glasgow. That's kind of cool. I didn't know he was Scottish. But Pentangle blew my mind. I love that band, dude. I guess they're kind of close to, in America, I guess, was, what's the name of that band? Fuck. No, it just came in my brain and went. Wasn't it like Sandy something? Sandy Denny. Sandy Denny. Oh man, okay. She was born in. All right, she was English too. I thought she was American. I thought Fairport Convention was like America's answer to Pentangle or something, but they were an English band too. Damn it, England! Why do you have too much good music coming out of the UK, man? It's like America's gonna get a complex. 'Cause if you really do put a list together of the best rock bands ever, it's gonna be like UK. Then maybe people would mention Tom Petty or Aerosmith or the Doors, maybe the Byrds. I'm forgetting about other stuff. Metallica, yeah. But then I don't know, if you do list your top 10 rock bands of all time or best frontmen of all time, it's always like Beatles, Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Queen, The Who, and then maybe somebody will give Aerosmith some love. But I've always argued that Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are the best American rock band. So at least they can compete. I'd put Tom Petty against anything out of the UK. I think he was just a brilliant songwriter. Best American rock bands. Who am I forgetting? Do people put like Alice Cooper in that? Iggy Pop? But the Ramones would make my list. The Ramones would, yeah. I'm just trying to think of the classic ones, like not my all-time favorite bands, but the ones that would make all those lists. Well, CCR's on there. I like Fogerty. Yeah, I guess Springsteen's pretty popular actually in the UK too. But Springsteen, Grateful Dead, yeah, Allman Brothers, the Eagles. This is what Google is telling me. These bands shaped the sound of American rock through extensive touring, blah, 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 blah. Kiss, I never got into Kiss, so I can't comment on them. But yeah, Metallica, Van Halen. I thought some people in Van Halen were like from, I don't know, weren't they like Dutch or something? Leonard Skinner, not a huge fan. Yeah, they list the Ramones. All right, good on you. Ramones deserve to be on that list, the best American bands of all time. Yeah, people can buy that argument. You hear the Ramones on the radio, so they're not like completely anti corporate anarchist punk. They're kind of a novelty band, but they wrote really good songs. But yeah, that's cool. My love of Scotland started from Braveheart as a kid. I remember being down the Jersey Shore and watching Braveheart. I think the hot movies in that time period of my youth when I was like in high school, Braveheart, rewatchable like all the time. Everyone was watching Braveheart. My Island, and everyone was watching Dazed and Confused. I wanted to be in that movie, and I still kind of do. I wish I was one of the cool kids from Dazed and Confused that got to hang out with all those, hot high school ladies. The one woman, Mila Jovovich, right? I think she's in that too. She's like singing her song about aliens. That song's about aliens, man. So yeah, my friend group, I think Braveheart was a big movie for a lot of people. Everyone would watch Braveheart, talk about Braveheart. It's just a classic, epic movie to the point where some people would actually find editing mistakes because we would watch the battle scenes so often, and there's a scene where two of the extras are like barely battling with like broomsticks. You can see it in the background if you pause it, but I guess it's hard to really, as a director or editor, you're gonna miss that stuff because that's a long ass movie, and every battle scene was just so insanely intense. Like from a filming perspective, it had to be a nightmare. Braveheart. What's it called when I forget what it's really called. Is it like outtakes? Maybe. If I search Braveheart outtakes, what does that bring up? Outtakes. That's more like bloopers or something. Gag reel. I don't know. I have to watch these later to get some nostalgia. Cause yeah, goofs. There's one where I'm sure IMDb. They probably have something. But there's one battle scene that's funny because the battle scenes are so epic. Mel Gibson's giving his speech to the Scottish Army in war paint as they're fighting for their independence, and then the battle starts, and then you see all these other extras with like broomsticks instead of these swords or whatever the fuck they were fighting with back then. It's pretty comical. So yeah, my love of Scottish culture developed from my teenage years, watching Braveheart. That was the gateway, and then listening to music, getting into punk rock, finding stuff from the UK, and then later on in my life, finding more folky or psychedelic rock. The Sparrow and the Workshop, I don't think they got that popular, but man, the first time I heard that band, I was like, holy fuck. It sounded like the Cranberries, but even like with a heavy Black Sabbath appeal. The Sparrow and the Workshop. And yeah, I loved the Cranberries too when I was growing up. I thought they wrote amazing songs too. But if you never heard of The Sparrow and The Workshop, go check them out. They don't really do anything for anymore, I don't think. Maybe the lead singer kind of did a solo thing. But The Sparrow and The Workshop, indie three-piece trio from Glasgow. Belfast-born lead singer Jill O'Sullivan, Welshman Nick Packer, and Scotsman Gregor Donaldson. And yeah, I really fell in love with this band. 2010. I feel like they were around before that. Around that time period. And yeah, I really fell in love with them. 2008 to 2014, that's when they were active. And yeah, they've had a couple, maybe 3 or 4 albums, and they're all really good, like really good. They have 3 studio albums: Crystals Fall, Spitting Daggers, and Murderopolis. That was their last one. And yeah, really amazing band. Finding this band, I'd highly recommend you listen to them. That led me to other things in the Scottish scene, because I was like, all right, if they're coming from Glasgow, I guess there's got to be a lot of cool shit from there. I don't know when I actually found them, but yeah, even Wikipedia lists Black Sabbath as an influence, Jefferson Airplane, Talking Heads. There was a band in America, I think from Portland, called Rose Windows that had a similar appeal to me, but they didn't last very long either. Rose Windows Band. That's good. We're going down a music rabbit hole instead of talking about cannibalism. Make sure you floss after eating your family, everybody. Rose Windows was a psychedelic rock band from Seattle, Washington. Yeah, they're not around anymore. Sub Pop. I saw them once. Got drunk by myself at this place in Philly called like the Milk Bar or some shit. And it was just this little upstairs room, and they were pretty amazing. A long time ago. Had to be over a decade ago now. But yeah, check them out too. Rose Windows. Maybe they have 2 albums only, but really good psychedelic rock. Amazing vocalist. If you like that Jefferson Airplane type of shit, amazing band. Like a flute player, and you know, they have all that fiddle shit too, I think. I think there was a woman playing a fiddle, but maybe I'm making that up. I don't remember now. I don't know. No one's listed here as a fiddle player. But yeah, amazing band. I don't know if they ever did anything after that. There's not much on Wikipedia about their later involvement with any music, so that kind of sucks. Maybe they'll come back one day. But yeah, it's cool to branch out. If you would have said psychedelic rock to me when I was 13, I would have no idea what you're talking about. I barely knew the Doors until really the Forrest Gump soundtrack. The Forrest Gump soundtrack was my gateway drug to the Doors. Probably Jefferson Airplane, Fortunate Son was on there. You talk about one soundtrack that led to so much music. It was definitely that one. All right, I gotta look that up now. Forrest Gump soundtrack, because I know for a fact I didn't know anything about 60s anti-Vietnam or psychedelic rock until I saw that movie. Forrest Gump soundtrack. I know it was pretty popular. It was like a double disc. Yeah, of course. Fortunate Son was in there, Blowing in the Wind. All right. Of course, you have to have Elvis on there. Wilson Pickett, Joan Baez, Fortunate Son, Aretha Franklin, and Bob Dylan, Rainy Day Woman. Yeah, that's probably the first time I heard of Bob Dylan, too. Mamas and the Papas, Buffalo Springfield. Like, it's every popular band from the 60s, pretty much. That was the first time I heard the Doors, Break On Through. Mrs. Robinson's on there, Jefferson Airplane, The Byrds, The Fifth Dimension, The Age of Aquarius. I used to find that record all the time at like Goodwill. Supremes, Three Dog Night. All right, Joy to the World, yeah. I remember that song too. Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog. Harry Nilsson. I don't know him that well, but I know his popular songs. VJ Thomas. Yeah, Jackson Brown's on there, Running on Empty. I think that's when Forrest Gump is taking his cross country run or whatever. Doobie Brothers. Who likes the Doobie Brothers? Because we've got one of them. Gladys Knight, Fleetwood Mac was on there. I don't remember that. That might have been when Jenny was in 70s mode, taking cocaine off the hotel balcony. Maybe that was that scene. Fleetwood Mac, Go Your Own Way. Bob Seger's on there. That's pretty cool. And Willie Nelson too, On the Road Again. So yeah, it's it's like it must have been pretty easy for them to actually. Maybe it wasn't. I was gonna say it was easy to put this soundtrack together because it's just like, hey, we just need 40 songs of the best American classic rock from the 60s, 70s. Can you put that together? The hard part is to select which ones to pick because there's just a lot of options. I'm sure there's other bands that they probably wouldn't have put on here, but didn't really fit. Yeah, Beach Boys, Sloop John B. Yeah. So yeah, that's the gateway drug. When I was probably 13, I guess, watching Forrest Gump and listening to the soundtrack later, that was like, all right, I need to get the Doors now and listen to all Jim Morrison stuff because I heard one song from Forrest Gump. I'm sure a lot of people probably can relate to this story. That was a pretty popular. I think it must have sold pretty well because that movie won all the awards. I'm sure the music associated with the music or associated with the movie also did well. Kind of like what Stranger Things did. They brought Kate Bush back. They brought Metallica back to the new generation. So that's pretty cool. I always say, like, when I speak about, I want to use this song in this movie, but I don't know if I can afford it or get permission of it. But I'm like, why does it have to be like that? Can't it just be a mutually beneficial relationship? I use a song, I think I end this movie as the credits come down with the Sparrow and the Workshop song, Beneath the Water or something like that. Water. And I'm like, I guess you would have to pay Sparrow and the Workshop or their record company to get the rights to use that. But I'm like, if this movie or episode becomes popular, people are going to be like me. Like I heard The Doors and I'm like, I heard Break On Through. I'm like, man, I got to get the best of The Doors, the 2 CD. I remember getting that as a kid, probably 13 or 14, and getting pretty into it. Or getting Bob Dylan's greatest hits after that and stuff like that. It grows like that. One little song you hear will open up a new frontier of music. And if somebody hears Sparrow in the Workshop after watching this episode, maybe they'll go buy their albums. And that's the hope I have. It could be a mutually beneficial thing. You just want to make good art. That's your main objective, but as you're doing that, you have to survive. You have to make a living, man. So it becomes more difficult when those two motivations are kind of in competition. Am I doing this for the money, or am I doing this because I'm an artist with integrity? And the art's what is what really matters, man. The money's secondary, as I'm going to be homeless, eating leaves in the forest. But it won't matter because I had artistic integrity, man. As I'm eating stuff out of a dumpster, well, I never sold out, man. Sleeping in a homeless shelter, but I still have my artistic integrity. I never sold out to the man. But yeah, I'm ready to sell out. Not sell out maybe 100%, but I'm ready to sell out maybe 30 to 40% of my artistic integrity to actually make a living off this. So I'm at that point. I think I've been at that point, really. And again, it's not like I'm doing anything radical with any of these stories. These are a lot of people would read this script and be like, well, it's not gory enough. It's not radical enough to get people's attention in the horror genre. And I would probably have to agree because they're probably more in touch with what's hot in the horror genre or what you really need to do to get people's interest in the characters and story. It's a conversation I never had because I'm not a part of anything like that. But maybe someday soon I could get more involved with that. All right. We left off in this story on page 23, I believe. And we were showing that first scene where the shadowy figure of Hilda levitates over the lake water, gripping a bloody kitchen knife as all these human severed limbs are coming around her in the lake. And a whirlpool is forming, and fires are erupting along the fucking shore. It's a real demonic scene there. And let's continue now. All right. Well, actually, the last scene was after that vision. Hilda wakes up and she's snuggling in her mother's chest as Bridget hums a melody to calm her. And it appears that all these spirits are watching them from underneath the lake water. A little bit later in that day, the family is in the kitchen. The family, I mean Layden, Hilda and Flora and Bridget. The family enjoys a breakfast of oats, berries, eggs, tomatoes, and rolls as Layden especially stuffs his mouth like a pig, Layden while chewing. First frost comes the night, feel it in my bones. So this is actually the next morning, sorry. So you had this scene at the lake, that's like the afternoon. So this is the next morning as the family's having breakfast as the sun's rising. And Layden is saying, the first frost comes tonight, feel it in my bones. He takes a swig from his whiskey flask while Hilda reaches for one of the last two remaining rolls, only to have it smacked away by him. Layden, hey girl, still punished you. So Layden really does have this weird relationship with Hilda. He kind of gives her a real hard time and favors Flora over her. Layden bites down into one of the rolls and places the other one onto Flora's plate. She smiles and thanks, takes a bite, then sticks out her tongue at Hilda while he isn't watching. Layden towards Hilda with his mouth full still. Be more like your sis and mind your manners. Layden rises, kisses Flora on her forehead, then grabs his tool belt and walks towards the door. Bridget, don't be drinking by the lake all day again with Morrison. He belches and walks out while she leans in towards Hilda and grabs her hand. Bridget, playfully whispering, for the lady of the lake might come a-calling. Hilda giggles, while Flora rolls her eyes towards her like a diva and takes another bite from her roll. Bridget rises soon after and clears some dishes from the table. Bridget, come on now, girls. Plenty work to be handled. The twin sisters stare each other down at the kitchen table. A little bit later, Layden is now near a wooden shack in the country, and he's chopping down a large tree near this decrepit structure. And on this structure, there's a column of small triquetra symbols carved on the wooden walls. Those triquetra symbols again. A somber, tripping melody plays from a piano inside the shack as he walks over curiously to the rotted wood and peeks in through a thin opening in the wood. Inside the shack at the same time, two old women dance naked inside with drooping breasts and crazy disheveled hair, while another old woman plays the old small upright piano with very intricate carvings and rune symbols on the piano legs. In the movie Midsummer, and when they get to Sweden and they're staying with this pagan community, that is creepy as fuck. They stay in this one room and there's all these weird markings everywhere. And from what I remember, at least, that's what I'm going for. Something that looks like that. Just weird symbols that look like witchcraft runes or whatever they're called. All right. Outside the shack, Layden leans against the rotted wood, staring in shock as these disgusting naked women dance and chant along to the music inside. He swigs his flask and gazes towards the sky, Layden, quietly to himself. Holy Father above, summon the hellfire. A raven croaks above him, causing him to jump back in fright. So another jump scare there. Just as one of the women from inside slams her body violently against the wood siding. Startled, he falls, bangs his head onto a large stone, and blacks out, while the woman's eyeball stares towards him through the siding. So that's all we see is this creepy, witchy woman's eyeball staring through the wood. Now Layden's having a dream. He's sleeping on a shore near the lake under this blood-red sky. So you can tell it's a dream from how the sky looks. While the beautiful druid priestess from that earlier scene in the beginning levitates towards him. He wakes and stares towards her, dazed by her beauty as she takes her shirt off. He shuts his eyes and sucks on her nipple, only to open them moments later and find he's sucking on the droopy, wrinkled breast of the old woman by the lake from previous scene. This woman is digging her long fingers into his eyes, and then she pushes on the back of his head as he sucks harder on her nipple like a hungry baby. Very disturbing images there, to say the least. That is the end of Layden's dream. Thank God. Now he's waking up on the shore by the lake. Everything's back to normal, but he does have a bruise on the back of his head and he doesn't know how he got there. He gazes towards his reflection in the lake with confusion and washes his face in the water. A formation of stones surround him in the shape of the triquetra symbol, much too large for him to notice. But as we drift high above, it's a truly majestic sight, like a crop circle. So it is just a huge triquetra symbol, but the stones are arranged so perfectly that you can't tell what it is until you really back up and see it from overhead. Just to give you that example, like they're marking their territory, like this is witch's territory, motherfucker. Don't fuck with us. Yeah, it is like a gang symbol almost, yeah. All right, back at the cottage. Flora is fixing her hair, using the reflection in the window, then posing like a model, while Bridget and Hilda kneel behind her in the garden, their hands covered in dirt. Bridget holds up some sage towards Hilda in the garden. Bridget, sage for the sacred cleanse. She then picks some garlic. Bridget, garlic for Hecat's guidance. Not sure if I'm saying that right. Hecate, Hecate. I think it's some kind of a mythological goddess or something. And then Bridget holds up some rosemary. Bridget, rosemary to ward away those thieving. She rests the rosemary on Hilda's ear and kisses her forehead while a raven flies by the cottage. She rises to her feet, wipes dirt off her hand, and everything starts spinning around her faster and faster. Suddenly, she collapses onto the dirt as Hilda bends down and gently shakes her. Hilda, Mama, Mama, Mama. Flora runs over. Hilda, go find Papa, Flora, go. Flora just starts running to find their father as Hilda desperately tries to wake her mother up. Hilda, Mama, Mama. A little bit later, Flora is now leading the drunken Layden, somewhat drunken. Like you could say in this movie, Layden is like always drunk in a way, sometimes more than other times. So Layden is coming into the garden where he kneels down and lifts Bridget's lifeless head from the dirt, then aggressively clutches Hilda's arm, Leiden slurring, "What did you do, girl? What did you do?" So he's kind of in shock, seeing his dead wife. I don't know what a raven symbolizes. I don't know why I put that there. She sees this raven flying before she dies. That's some kind of a omen of her death. I'm not sure why I put that there. Maybe I was trying to find symbolism of birds that kind of are bad omens, and I guess ravens kind of fit that. Other people could come up with something better if you're a real witch and and you can think of something cool, go for it. All right. So yeah, Leiden sees his wife dead, and Hilda is watching them like her entire world just disappeared. Because you have to realize Hilda and her father don't get along. Her mother was like her entire world, so she's really fucked up, probably more than even Leiden is. All right, a little bit later, or this is the next morning, sorry. They already made a grave site and buried her body. Or if that doesn't make sense, if usually in Scottish heritage it would take a couple days to do this, then you could just make it like a couple days later, whatever the usual process is. I don't know what religion these people are, but I think I do have them celebrating Christmas later. So I guess there's some kind of a sect of Christianity. Maybe they would have a viewing at that point and then bury the body after. But regardless of when, right now we're at Bridget's grave site outside of the cottage, a little bit into the country in the daytime. It could be the next morning. It could be a couple days later. Flora is hugging Leiden's torso as he swigs from his flask and weeps, while Morrison places some fresh blue flowers on Bridget's grave. Hilda kneels nearby, next to the grave, sobbing uncontrollably as she digs her fingers into the dirt. All right, now we're going to the lake. We drift over the calm water as demonic moans echo from underneath. Just a quick scene there. Back to Bridget's gravesite, Hilda, and this is at nighttime now. So at the gravesite, it was daytime. Over the lake, it's daytime. And they said their final goodbyes to Bridget. And now it's nighttime, and Hilda is still at the gravesite, the only one still remaining there, sleeping on top of the grave, her hands covered in dirt as we drift high above into the stars. All right. Now it's the next day. We're drifting below from the clear bright sky as Morrison and Leiden, both noticeably older, balding and fatter, carry the same upright piano from the witch's wooden shack that we just saw them playing that song and dancing around naked. They're carrying that piano towards the front door, their clothing covered in fresh dirt, soot, and ash. All right, so we're making a big time jump here, and you don't really have to put any superimposed 10 years later or whatever, because we're going to see now they're both older, about 10 years older or so, well, 8 years older or whatever, and Flora and Hilda are now 18. I was going to add a scene, possibly, if it's required, showing how they got this piano, and it would be something like they set this witch's shack on fire to get these witches out of there with some other townspeople, because that kind of plays into the story later. And then they go in before the building completely burns and they take the piano out because they think it might be valuable. I don't know. I think in this one, yeah, Flora was begging her father for a piano, so that's probably what it was. They're like, hey, we know where a piano is. You could put a scene in there if you wanted to. I don't think it's necessary, but I could be convinced either way. I did make a note for myself because it could be another kind of horrific type of scene here in the middle of this movie where Leiden, Morrison, and some other men go to this witch's shack at night and they set it on fire, and these witches are trying to fight back with some witchcraft. And maybe they have to kill these women and bury their bodies as they burn their house, or they just trap them in there. That could be better. They trap them in the cottage or in this shack. Sorry, this wooden shack. They kind of barricade it. So inside, these witches are just burning, and they're trying to fly and out the window. So they're just like ping pong balls going back and forth trying to escape. And then before everything burns up, Layden and Morrison walk in and grab the piano to remove it. And then like one of the witches grabs at them, but Morrison grabs like an axe and like chops her hand off or some shit. You could add something there. It might be a cool scene. It might be just filler, but something like that does play a part in this story. The audience might be wondering, where did they get that piano? How did they get it? What happened to the witches? They can make up whatever the hell they want in their head, which is kind of cool to write a story like that. But if you really want to show every little bit of this, you could add a short scene before this. Before we get to this scene, maybe Layden is in a bad place after his wife's death. That's his motivation now. And he wants to make Flora happy. But, you know, this is 10 years later. That doesn't, forget what I just said. That doesn't make sense. This is now when Flora is 18, so it's 8 years after the death. Maybe those witches just died of natural causes. And they had an estate sale in the witch's shack, and Layden was able to purchase this piano. Whatever you want to put there. But yeah, it would have to happen before this scene, when they still look like older from the gravesite. So it's something to think about. Because now Layden is carrying in the piano with Morrison, while Flora, who's now 18, like I said, runs over excited. She gazes towards the ornate carvings on the piano body and the rune symbols etched on the legs. Flora. It is perfect, just perfect. She hugs him as she runs her hand over the dusty piano. Flora, where did you find such a piece? Layden and Morrison eye each other, not prepared to answer her inquest. So that's what I'm thinking. They're looking at each other like, we can't tell her that we burned down the witch's shack. So maybe that scene is necessary. You could start this new time period with that scene. Kind of set the mood of where the culture is going. You kill these witches, burn them in their house. And it's kind of a symbolic thing. Like, we're moving into the Industrial Revolution where the ways of the old are going extinct. So it's another bit of symbolism if you want to include that. Now I'm kind of convincing myself that I have to add that scene now. So that's what I'm thinking now. All right. None you worry about all that now, love. That's how Layden answers that question. Flora is like, where did you get this piano? Because it's so unusual. None you worry about all that now, love. Now we meet Hilda, who's, 18, looking exactly like Flora still. But she's got more disheveled hair, and her mole on her left cheek is a little bit larger. She's scrubbing the floor on her knees, while Layden and Morrison carry the piano by her, rudely paying her no mind. She pauses her scrubbing and watches them from her knees, gazing towards the beautiful, mysterious piano as Flora skips by her. Flora. Isn't it just perfect, Hilda? So we got like a Cinderella type of thing going on. Hilda's the one sister who's not really respected or treated fairly, and Flora's the favored child here. So it's a bit of a Cinderella type of story, but it gets a little bit darker than Cinderella. All right, we're in the piano room in the cottage, which is just an empty room, but it becomes the piano room because they put the piano against this wall, and Layden and Morrison are now catching their breath after carrying this piano through the house. And Flora is standing by their side. Layden, well, come on then, give it a go now, girl. Flora sits down on the piano bench and hits some random keys, while Hilda peeks her head into the room from the hallway. Layden, we get you some lessons and you become expert this time next spring. He kisses her father on the cheek as she hits more of the keys. Leiden. Your mother, God rest her, would be so proud. Always wanted to pass on the gift of music. In a weird way, I think Leiden kind of blames it on Hilda for some reason, because she was the last one with Bridget, so he just kind of blames her for his wife's death, I guess. You could say that's a bit of the motivation, but I don't know. He's just an asshole. He's a drunk kind of ruffian, and he plays favorites with his kids. So he's kind of an asshole. Hilda squints towards Flora from the hallway with a sinister gaze of envy. She's probably like holding a broom here or something. As Flora is fiddling around on the piano keys, but she doesn't know what she's doing. Now we're going into a montage. I feel like you should go about this montage as a changing of the seasons. So first we start in springtime, which is probably where we are at the moment, as we're inside the piano room to begin this montage. And we're gazing out the window at all the colorful splendors of spring, so the audience knows it must be spring. The bushes and flowers are in bloom and whatever. Flora's at the piano practicing, squinting towards the sheet music as she struggles to play the corresponding notes. She quickly tosses the sheet music down in frustration, while Hilda peeks in from the hallway with a broom in her hand. Now we're in the summertime, so you could just do a time cut however you want to do that. We're now gazing out the window. You could go start this scene at the window and then end it at the window and then kind of do a time cut. Because now out the window, the sun's shining down on Hilda as she picks rosemary from the garden, sweat dripping down. So you can tell it's very hot now. I don't know what the summers are like in Scotland, but it's summertime. Flora is playing a somber waltz on the piano, while a piano teacher in her 50s, female, counts the time. Piano teacher. And 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. All right, now we're cutting that, and we're now in the fall. We gaze out the window again as the leaves are turning to glorious shades of orange, red, and brown, many off their branches. So we're in the thick of fall now in Scotland. Hilda is stirring a large pot of soup over the stove in the kitchen and wiping sweat from her forehead while humming a haunting melody to herself, which will eventually become known as the Wraith's Refrain. So this is really our first introduction, our introduction to how the Wraith's Refrain really goes. Maybe she built this off of the melody her mother was singing or humming before, if you want to make that even more connected to her ancestry, you could do that. It's almost like through the music, her mother will be passing on this curse of Sawney and all this witchcraft. Yeah, because maybe that's why the mother ended up dying in the garden. I really don't explain. It could have been anything. It could have been a heart attack. Could have been just a freak thing. Her heart stopped beating. To me, it's something deeper. Maybe because she was an ancestor of this ancient curse, maybe she was expected to service the woman, the lady of the lake, but she wasn't doing enough. She was only doing the ritual things, like throwing berries in the lake, instead of actually cutting gashes and giving this lake blood. So the lake kind of turned on her. The woman of the lake kind of turned on Bridget. Like, hey man, you're an ancestor. I'm your mother and father. You got to give me some human blood from time to time. So that was Bridget's last chance to kind of appease those evil spirits. But at this point, it's not even her fault. She's probably not even aware of the legacy anymore. Even though she has this weird birthmark, she's probably not attached to that folklore. She doesn't even know about Sawney and her family of cannibals. Like, that's kind of how I would portray her character. Somehow she was an ancestor of these people, but maybe they found her as a baby in the cave. That's a good explanation. And she was able to grow up in a normal environment away from all that crazy shit. So she never even knew what her legacy was, but maybe it was in her subconscious. That's why she was leaving bread out for the birds and throwing berries into the lake, these red berries, because they were symbolic of what her ancestors would do. They would kill people, eat people, and then throw some of the body parts into the lake as a sacrifice or whatever the fuck else. Like, yeah, I think that's a good explanation of her death. All right, so she's where am I? Hilda is stirring this pot of soup, and she's humming the Wraith's refrain to herself. So she's the original composer of it, really. And now she stares out the window as her mother's ghostly figure flashes in the garden, only to just as quickly disappear, while a somber waltz echoes from the piano room. At the same time, in the piano room, Flora is practicing that waltzy melody on the piano, her playing now much improved, while Layden watches her from the hallway proudly. So Flora has been practicing all year since the springtime, and she's gotten a little bit better. All right, now we're back gazing out the window in the piano room. It's now winter time as light snow falls, and Flora is playing a waltz version of Ring Around the Rosie at the piano, while Layden and Morrison watch her proudly and pass the flask back and forth. I know there's some kind of a symbolic darkness to Ring Around the Rosie. I think it's about the plague. We all fall down, like we're all dying from the plague. I want to say that's what that song is about. I think so. I'm pretty confident in that, but I'm not 100%. Ring Around the Rosie. It sounds like a kid's song, and most kids sing that shit, but I think it's about the plague, right? The Black Plague or whatever the fuck. The bubonic plague, whatever it was called. Ring around the Rosie. Ring around the Rosie. I just want to make sure because I'm kind of curious now. Ring around the Rosie, blah, blah, blah. It's about this, 1665 Great Plague of London. All right, I didn't know it was that. I don't know what that plague was. Lyrics representing symptoms and death, a rosy rash, ring around the rosy, herbal protection, pocket full of posies. So that's the shamanic element. You're protecting yourself from plague by keeping herbs in your pocket, because people didn't have big pharma back then to buy some vaccines or whatever the fuck else. Sneezing symptoms, a tissue. I didn't know that was the lyrics. And death, we all fall down. Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's a dark song, man. Like, it doesn't get much creepier than a bunch of kids singing Ring Around the Rosie. Then they all fall down. That's representing that, like, the death from this plague or whatever. That's pretty dark shit. Folklore experts, blah, blah, blah. Folklore experts suggest that this is a typical example of a modern myth, as popular culture seeks dark hidden meanings behind simple children's rhymes. So maybe it isn't. Some interpretations suggest Ring Around the Rosie was an innocent singing game, or had pagan origins rather than a reference to a specific plague. I didn't even know that was the lyrics. A tissue. Instead of ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Ashes, a tissue. Yeah, that's kind of weird how things evolve like that. Well, whether it is or it isn't, it's still an interesting song to put into a movie like this, because I think most people believe it is about some plague or some shit. Because according to Google, this connection is likely a modern myth, as the plague interpretation only appeared centuries after the disease. So maybe it was just made up. But I don't know. I kind of like the other explanation. I don't know. Whatever. All right, continuing. where were we? We were in the winter time, where inside the piano room, yeah, Flora's playing this waltz of Ring Around the Rosie. Maybe it's not really a waltz, a 1 2 3 1 2 3, so maybe she's playing it a little differently. Ring around there, 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. Yeah, whatever. I'm not gonna try to figure it out right now. Outside at the same time, Hilda is placing her mother's mirror on her grave as a light snow falls, and she's humming her race refrain. All right. Now we are over the lake as the snow falls over the lake, the calm water, as all we hear is Hilda's humming of the race refrain, kind of creepily echoing through the countryside. That's the end of this montage. So what did this montage get us? It got us a year further into this story as we followed Flora taking piano lessons throughout the changing of the seasons and improving with every scene. Now we're going to go back to normal scene developments here. We're in the piano room at nighttime. Hilda scrubbing the floor on her knees, staring up towards the piano every few seconds. She leans the broom against the wall, walks to the piano, and sits upon the bench, bends down and touches the intricate rune symbols carved on the piano legs, then lightly hits some random keys, feeling an instant connection to the piano. So remember, she's a part of the Sawney tribe, just like Flora is, really, but I think Hilda got that gene where she was more connected to the dark side of the family history. So she's got this music inside of her too, and she's feeling this instant connection to the piano because it was a witch's piano that probably had some connection to that shit too. So she's playing the piano. She's never played it before, but she's a natural, and she's improvising this very somber melody on the piano keys based on her humming of the Wraith's refrain. So this is the first time we hear the Wraith's refrain on the piano. So it's a pretty powerful scene. You could extend this for a little bit as she plays it and really falls in love with the piano and gets this connection. Early morning now, as the sunlight's shining through the window, and Hilda's playing the Wraith's refrain still, like she played all night into the morning. And this haunting melody is filling the room with this foreboding atmosphere as Flora peeks her head in from the hallway and listens to the hauntingly beautiful composition with this utter contempt and jealousy on her face. So Flora has been practicing the piano all year long. Her sister goes in there and just learns to teach herself the piano, and she's way better than her. So Flora's like, what the fuck, man? She's all pissed off at this point. Now we're in the kitchen a little bit later, as Leiden is eating a bowl of beans, seated at the table, and Hilda washes dishes at the sink, humming her Wraith's refrain. He puts his tool belt on and fills up his flask with whiskey. Leiden, make quick with all your chores. Be back late. He walks towards the door and takes another swig from his flask. And then he turns back towards Hilda. Leiden, smoked haddock for supper, girl. He holds out his large gut. Leiden, be sure enough to satisfy. She ignores him and just keeps washing the dishes. Leiden, you hear me now, girl? He waits a few moments, then farts in her direction and walks out. So maybe he's got a sense of humor too. He's just farting towards her. She dries a plate with a rag, then gazes out the window as a classical melody echoes from the piano room. So I'm kind of thinking, yeah, Leiden at this point in his life, he probably hasn't had a woman since his wife died. Maybe there's prostitutes, I don't know. But yeah, he's kind of given up on a lot of things in life, so he's probably calmed down, but he's still a drunk, and he's still kind of a loudmouth like that. All right. So that's the scene in the kitchen. At the same time, back in the piano room, Flora is struggling to play a section of this classical melody, so some classical piece of music, and she struggles to play it on the piano. She slams her hands down on the piano keys in frustration. Now she attempts to replicate that haunting Wraith's refrain that she watched Hilda play the night prior, but she can't quite remember the melody, and she gives up. And then she lounges in a chair against the wall and just dozes off. All right, back in the kitchen, Hilda is washing more dishes as she hums her Wraith's refrain, kind of in her own world completely. She's like finally happy to have maybe a purpose in life because she found her music, I guess. And she's washing the dishes and just humming this Wraith's refrain that she composed on the piano the night before. Now we're down by the lake again, a little bit later in the day. Hilda's kneeling by the water, washing light-in stained undergarments while humming her Wraith's refrain. She stares at her reflection in the water as it suddenly morphs into her mother's, so she's seeing her mother's face in the lake. She turns away in shock and stares back as her reflection now returns back to normal. Another horror trope, but there's so much potential with the lake to get real creepy every time you're near the lake, whether it's the music, just the atmosphere you develop around this lake, because it's got such a history of cursing and witchcraft and all this shit. Angus, now in his 20s, walks towards her carrying a fishing rod. Angus: "Hey Hilda, you seen your sis round?" Hilda covers her mole with the dirty undergarments, too shy to make eye contact with him. Hilda: "Have not seen her, Angus. Try the cottage." He holds the fishing rod up towards her. Angus: "Fixing on surprising her with a hearty supper, if the gods be with me." They share a few moments of awkward silence, then Angus smiles and walks away. Angus: "All right then. See you, Hilda." Hilda watches him walk away with an expression of longing as she angrily tosses Leiden's undergarments into the lake. So yeah, she's kind of like pissed off, I guess, too. She's doing all the chores and her sister's just like sleeping on the chair. So there's an element of that Cinderella shit that I was talking about before, but in a much subtle type of way, more subtle, because I don't want to just rip that off. But that's one of the main conflicts here at this point, because we showed that in the beginning when they were playing hide and seek in the country, and yeah, Flora just gets her way, and Hilda kind of gets beaten by her father. So it is a relationship that builds as when we first meet them. So I kind of had to put that in there later too. All right, we're back in the piano room a little bit later, as outside the piano room, actually, in like near the window, Flora is kissing Angus in the shade as piano music echoes from inside. So this is later in the day. Hilda got back to the cottage already, and she's inside the piano room playing the Wraith's refrain, and she's lost in her own trance again, her own world. Outside, Angus stares through the window towards Hilda at the piano, mesmerized by her haunting Wraith's refrain melody, like she was a siren calling out to him. Flora stares towards her with a jealous scowl again as she punches Angus in the arm. Angus: "Aye, Flora, envy don't quite suit you." Enraged, she grabs dog shit from the garden and tosses balls of it through the window towards Hilda. Now inside, Hilda is getting dog shit splattered onto her left cheek, right where her mole is, while Flora launches more balls through the window, striking the piano and floor with all this dog shit. Hilda wipes the shit off her face and turns towards the window, where Flora and Angus both laugh towards her. just as Layden stumbles in the piano room drunk and notices the mess. Layden towards Hilda. What is all this mess then, girl? Flora and Angus run away from the window laughing before Layden can spot them, as he angrily walks towards Hilda at the piano. Layden. Well, go on. Hilda stares towards her father in humiliation. Dog shit smeared all over her face, neck, and dress. He drags her away from the piano by her hair, then smacks her face. Layden. Clean this filth, girl. Clean this filth, girl. He walks away, swigging his flask. Layden. Now. And don't let me find you messing about on your sister's piano again. Alright, so now he's gone and Hilda is like miserable, covered in dog shit. And she's breaking down on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. And then she gets a little angry, punches her fist onto the floor harder and harder until her knuckles actually bleed. Later that night, or now we're into the nighttime, sorry. That was all daytime. Now we're at night. And we're in the cottage hallway. Hilda staring at her lifeless, dour reflection in the mirror. She pulls a kitchen knife from her pocket and slices off the mole on her left cheek as her blood drips down onto the floor. So she's kind of going a bit of a breakdown here. She's slicing things off her face. And yeah. All right. Now we're in the kitchen the next morning. Hilda is trying to hide the large scar on her left cheek where her mole used to be. And Flora is staring towards her and giggling while Layden reaches out and touches her facial scar in disgust. So they all know she cut off her mole and they're all just kind of messing with her now. Layden, a face fit for the troughs, you. He laughs at her while stuffing his face with breakfast rolls, then touches her scar again while Hilda pushes it away in anger. So Hilda's like trying to stand up for herself, pushing his hand away. Layden, what? Old dad can't teach his own daughter? Can't tease his own daughter? She grips onto a kitchen knife tightly while he swigs his flask and walks away, laughing loudly to himself. Layden, don't be sulking all day now on account of your vileness. Get to your chores. He walks out while the twin sisters stare each other down and share some tense silence. Flora rises with a smirk, grabs a roll, and walks away towards the piano room. Her laughter echoes from the hallway. So maybe even here she's repeating like that childish insult. Little piggy face. What was it? Little something piggy face. Da-na-na-na piggy face. Maybe she's trying to do that to rile her up, or she's saying something to get Hilda kind of triggered. And we hear her from the hallway doing something like that, as Hilda just sits alone at the kitchen table and grips the knife even tighter. So yeah, she's starting to get more anger inside of her at this point. You could extend some of these stories out, I get it. Are we at the point where she's ready to kill people? Is she at that point in her head? Did we develop a story good enough where she loses her mother and then she has to spend the time with her father and other twin sister and they're both kind of against her? Did we build the story enough at this point to make it seem like a murder is possible? Not to give it away, but that's kind of where I'm at in my head now. Because I want to make it as believable a story, even though, like I mentioned already too many times, there is that element of this curse. Sawney killed his own family, and then he started his own clan of people. Bridget was a part of that ancestry, and so is Hilda. So maybe she just has that naturally inside of her. And it took the piano playing that connection and forming that connection to the witchcraft elements of the piano to kind of develop that within her when she started playing the piano that one night. All right, so now we're entering a dream, Hilda's dream. Excuse me. In her dream, Hilda still has the mole on her left cheek, and she's playing the Wraith's Refrain on the piano inside the piano room. Out in the hallway, at the same time, Flora is now scrubbing the floor, like a reversal of positions here. Flora is now Cinderella, scrubbing the floor on her knees, as loud squeaks echo, like the room was full of mice. Flora freezes as she recognizes Hilda's Wraith's Refrain echoing from the piano room. Now Hilda levitates towards her twin sister, carrying an axe, lands in front of her, lifts up the axe, and violently lunges it towards her neck. You could film that however you want. Do we see it? Do we not see it? It's a dream anyway. Now, the end of this dream, Hilda's back inside the piano room playing the Wraith's Refrain, but the piano catches fire somehow. But she doesn't mind. She just calmly keeps playing as these flames totally engulf her. And her head is sliding right off her neck like butter. Now she's headless, and she plays more of her Wraith's Refrain while all these disgusting snakes crawl out from her neck. That's the end of Hilda's dream. So yeah, there's some weird shit going on in her mind now, all from this piano connection. Once Lady and Morrison brought the piano into the home, they thought they were doing something cool. They took this piano from this witch's shack, but they brought in this cursed piano into their own home. And yeah, all kind of bad things happen now. We're on page 35. I kind of wanted to show the connection in this dream, right, sequence. I'll say this quickly. I feel like I'm going long-winded in a lot of these explanations, but in this dream sequence, it's kind of to show the connection that twins have. So Hilda is slicing, supposedly lunging towards Flora with the axe, about to cut her head off or whatever. And then we see her at the piano, and her own head is falling off her neck. That little bit is intentional. It's to show the connection between twins. If one twin gets hurt, it's almost like the other twin will feel it. Sometimes you hear stories like that. There's a different connection between twin brothers or twin sisters. There's more maybe I was going to say telekinetic. Maybe there is something like that where they can kind of read each other's minds or finish each other's sentences. They have this stronger connection than just a brother and a brother would have who aren't twins, or a sister and a sister. So that's what that dream is supposed to show, that Hilda's dreaming about slicing her sister's head off, but at the end of her dream, it's her own head that's coming off. So that's what that's supposed to kind of represent. All right, moving on. We're outside now at Bridget's gravesite again as Hilda wakes up on top of her mother's grave. So she was having this dream while she was sleeping on her mother's grave, which is another fucked up thing. But maybe she does that a lot. She'll just go outside and sleep by her mother's gravesite. She pulls out the kitchen knife from her pocket, and she's now slicing 3 vertical gashes into her hand and her arm. Her blood drips down onto the grave as she slices 3 more gashes into her torso now. So she's doing the same thing that you could say her ancestors did in that blood ritual, blood sacrifice. Somehow she knows to do it instinctually or some other way, this connection to the witchcraft. All right, by the lake now, a shadowy figure is rising out of the calm water. And this is nighttime, if I didn't say. All of this is happening in the night. She wakes from her dream in the middle of the night, almost like a nightmare. Well, it is a nightmare. So by the lake, the shadowy figure is rising from the water, drifting through the countryside, as all we hear are these demonic moans echoing along the shore. back at Bridget's grave site, the shadowy figure, and all we really need to see is just this some kind of emotion and some kind of spirit floating towards her from the woods, and it's staring right towards Hilda, covered in blood. I'm sorry, Hilda's the one covered in blood from her self-inflicted wounds, and even though we don't see this figure, it's kind of calling out towards Hilda from the woods with these ghostly female whispers. Hilda, Hilda. Hilda gazes towards the direction of the voice as it continues. Hilda, Hilda. All right, make that as creepy as possible. Things are getting real creepy now. Hilda follows this shadowy figure into the lake, where it turns to face her, revealing Bridget's face. So she's seeing her mother now. She runs into her mother's arm and hugs her, but the figure quickly morphs into Ada, causing Hilda to convulse wildly in midair as fires erupt along the shore. At the same time, inside the cottage, in the bedroom, Flora is rising from her sleep in a panic, her eyes full of fright, like she was sensing something sinister entering her twin sister's body at that very moment. So whatever this spirit is claiming Hilda at this point to be her next minion, to feed the lake body parts, to continue this. Maybe it's been lost for decades, but now Hilda's going to bring back the old ways of this ritual sacrifice as this curse of the lake continues now into the early 1900s. Maybe all those witches that lived by the lake, maybe that's what they were there for, to try to keep this lake at bay by feeding it, I don't know, animal parts or some shit. I'm just making shit up now, but yeah, so, and this is a connection again to the twins. Hilda's being consumed by this evil lake spirit, and Flora is waking up all those miles away in her bedroom, but she feels that same kind of same sort of sinister feeling because it's entering her twin sister's body, because they share that sense of a connection. All right. A little bit later, and we're still at the lake. It's still nighttime. Soon after this happened, Layden and Morrison are drinking whiskey around a campfire, and Layden's starting this conversation. Be no more women like Bridget. Might go venture with the livestock in the near. They share a laugh. Morrison. Just need new experience. Few nights in the city will do you some good. Layden. Pointless endeavor. No waking this sleeping giant. He grabs at his crotch, while Hilda, scarred face, walks by them, a new wicked gaze in her eyes. So now she's really a different person at this point. Whatever spirit is claiming her, yeah, she's completely buying into it. She's not trying to fight this possession at all. And Layden sees her and he's like, what the fuck? And he's slurring at her. Girl, quit your sloth. Prepare some haddock for Morrison and I. So it's probably pretty late right now. I would say it's around midnight. She fell asleep, and now Morrison and Layden are drinking late night near the lake. And Layden's telling her to go back home and prepare us some fucking food. And now Hilda turns towards them with a sinister gaze. Layden, did you hear me? Go on now, girl. She blows towards a tree nearby as a thick branch snaps and falls towards him. As he leaps out of the way at the last second, she calmly walks away as he swigs his flask, fear now in his eyes. So she's becoming like Carrie, that movie Carrie, pretty famous witch movie. She's developing those types of witchy behavior where she can control stuff like that. And now we are getting even darker at this point. Well, we're near the end. There's only 10 pages left. So, yeah, we have to have some kind of a dark conclusion here. We're inside the cottage at the kitchen later that night. And Hilda's sitting at the table, motionless in a deep trance, gripping her knife tightly. Now we are... All right, so that's the first scene of this. Hilda gets back to the cottage and she's just sitting at the table with this gaze in her eye, staring blankly into nothingness as she grips her knife. You remember how the other two characters, they got possessed by the spirit of the lake and they would just stare into this tree for like all night long. So this is a similar type of deal now. The next morning, the sun is rising over the beautiful countryside. We go inside the kitchen, and Hilda's still at this table, kitchen table, motionless in this deep trance, gripping her knife tightly, almost like she hasn't moved an inch through the night. A little bit later, we drift towards the bright blue sky and look inside the window towards the piano room as Flora is playing a somber waltz from the piano. I hesitated there, because I don't want to tell the director how to do this, but that's how I picture it. Like, we would go inside, outside, and show Hilda's at the table gripping the knife. Flora's in the piano room playing this piano melody. Now we're back in the kitchen. Hilda is at the table, still gripping her knife, motionless in this deep trance. Now outside the cottage, Layden is snoring in the shade against the wall, flask by his side. So he was so drunk that he didn't even make it back inside the house. He just fell asleep outside. Back inside, Hilda is still at the table. Hilda's still at the table, motionless in this deep trance, gripping onto this knife tightly. Now outside, the sun is setting over the beautiful, peaceful countryside. So we're moving to night now. And I was actually wrong about that. Layden's been drinking all night. This is more his motivation here. He was drinking all night. He's making it home now. And he doesn't even get inside. He just passes out against the cottage wall with his flask by his side. So he's just starting to get asleep as the morning sun comes. But now we're moving towards evening as the sun is setting over this beautiful countryside. Inside, Hilda's still at the table, motionless in this deep trance, gripping her knife tightly. And now Layden's inside as well, sitting across from her, staring towards her with some trepidation and confusion as he tosses some nuts into his mouth. Layden, you all right there, girl? Hilda just stays motionless, not saying a word, while he stuffs some more nuts into his mouth. He walks over, waves his hands over his eyes to try to get a reaction, but he gives up after a few attempts. He then fills his flask with some whiskey and walks towards the front door. Layden, going out a bit. Watch over your sis. Hilda doesn't respond, sitting motionless at the table. Layden, you hear me, girl? Layden waits for a response, stares towards Hilda one last time as she doesn't move an inch. Then he gives up and walks out, kind of in a state of trepidation. Because maybe usually he would beat her for not answering him, but now he's just kind of afraid of her because she's just staring blankly at the wall, holding this knife. All right. A little bit later, we're in the piano room. Flora is still practicing her waltz on the piano. In the kitchen, Hilda's still at the table, still in this deep trance. So she's been in this state of catatonic state for like a long time. She's gripping her knife. We drift closer to her face, and her eyes finally blink after like 48 hours. And she's finally awoken from this trance. So that's what I really wanted to make these scenes be. Like, somebody just got possessed by this evil entity, and it's almost like another invasion of the body snatchers, that you don't recognize this person anymore. That's what I'm going for. That's why I kind of wrote the scenes like that. I just think it makes it creepier in this type of environment. Now we're in the piano room. A little bit later, as Flora bends down to grab a piece of sheet music from the floor, revealing Hilda standing right behind her, gripping her knife tightly. Flora turns towards her wicked gaze as Hilda slowly approaches with the knife raised up. Flora, Hilda, stop this game, now, at once. I'm saying this so bad. Hilda, stop this game, now, at once. So Flora's like, what the fuck is up with my twin sister right here? Hilda casually runs the knife across her sister's throat as blood squirts all over the piano keys, and Flora gasps for air. She then calmly pushes her off the piano bench onto the floor, where she bleeds out. So yeah, Hilda's not playing games, man. She just goes right up to her twin and just slices her throat like that. So we're watching Flora bleed out on the floor as Hilda claims control of the piano, sits down on the bench, and she's now playing her Wraith's Refrain. She puts the bloody knife on top of the piano, like in a very calm state, and plays her Wraith's Refrain over and over and over again as Flora convulses in the background, struggling for her last breath as more blood erupts from her neck. So yeah, we're getting disturbing here. This whatever entity entered Hilda, yeah, it's definitely one of those ancestors of Sawney and whatever the fuck that those people turned into. And we're moving on now, a few hours later. That would really be the most shocking scene at this point, but I think the audience is probably prepared for that moment. I've been kind of building this story up to get to this level, and that's where it gets to. Like, it almost had to go that direction. As soon as people see this relationship build, I think that's what people will think this story will be about. Sibling rivalries, or just family rivalries, or even between friends or co-workers or whatever it is. Kobe versus Shaq. It could be anything when there's that jealousy and envy and that type of close relationship like that, especially between twins, because they're so closely connected. That's what makes this kind of more interesting than other movies like this. But again, maybe there is a movie like this I'm not even thinking of. All right, so Hilda just totally slit her sister's throat, and like she didn't even think twice about it, and she's at the piano a few hours later as it is now daytime and the sun's coming out, and she continues to play her Wraith's Refrain on the piano as Flora's now dead body lays on the floor behind her. Hilda is humming a new melody to herself and writing down music notations onto a piece of sheet music. So she's in composer mode now. We are outside the cottage. Layden is drunkenly stumbling back towards the cottage, whistling a jolly melody to himself as he places his axe up against the front cottage wall. Back in the piano room, Hilda keeps playing her Wraith's Refrain, pausing and writing more notations onto the sheet music. Layden is now walking towards the piano room from the hallway, and he presses his ear against the wall. He shuts his eyes and enjoys Hilda's haunting Wraith's Refrain melody, but really he thinks it's Flora playing this stuff. And he's probably half drunk at this point anyway. So maybe he won't even be able to tell them apart. But I think it might be harder to tell them apart when they're young. At this point, I think they develop as 18-year-olds. It might be easier for the audience, especially just how they're dressed and their attitude and their voices. It would be easier to distinguish Hilda and Flora from one another. So Layden peeks his head in the piano room, and instantly he notices Flora's dead body on the floor, while Hilda calmly plays her Wraith's refrain. So he stumbles into the room. He falls over immediately and just vomits, seeing his dead daughter on the ground with her throat slit. Then he runs towards Hilda in a mad rage. Layden, always knew you'd land on the side of dark. So he grabs Hilda by the neck off the piano bench, just as her hair morphs into snakes that bite at his arms and face. So she's going full Medusa now. Whatever spirit is inside of her is a very strong, ancient type of a witchy spirit. So as soon as he grabs her, her hair turns into snakes, and they're all biting at his face. He stumbles back. As she grabs a knife off the piano, stabs him in the gut, and then slices a huge gash up his stomach, like that scene in The Godfather where Pacino goes back to his hometown or Sicily, and he like kills the one mob boss and just sticks that knife up his fat stomach. So now Hilda's father has been gutted and he's bleeding out next to Flora's dead body. Hilda sits back down on the piano like nothing just happened and calmly fixes her hair, which is now back to normal. No more Medusa. She plays more of her Wraith's refrain, then pauses, hums a new melody to herself, and writes more notations onto the sheet music. So really that's the more disturbing. We just saw two people die, but the more disturbing part of this is that Hilda did it so nonchalantly, and she keeps composing her music in between the deaths like they don't mean anything. All right, let's move on, try to get through these last 7 pages. The next morning, Hilda is in the kitchen with blood all over her face. She's eating a breakfast roll at the table, and then she calmly hums her Wraith's refrain to herself. Just a quick scene there. Now, a little bit later in the day, Hilda's she's out in the garden. She's planting some colorful blue flowers into the fresh soil, and she's still humming her Wraith's refrain to herself. A little bit later, she's in the piano room, and she's chopping up Layden's corpse with an axe. As she calmly hums her Wraith's refrain again, like very calmly, like, you know, people do housework, they'll hum to themselves to keep themselves calm and occupied. So she's chopping up Layden's mangled corpse, and she's chopping up his body, and now she does the same to Flora as well. So both of them are becoming, it's like an episode of Dexter as he chops up these people. That's what Hilda's doing right now. Now that night, Hilda is pushing a wheelbarrow full of body parts along the shoreline as she calmly hums the Wraith's refrain to herself. She tosses the body parts into the water while fires erupt along the shore and demonic moans echo from underneath the water. So she's feeding the spirits of the lake the body parts of her twin sister and father. So whatever entity claimed control of her is definitely, you know, I don't have to talk about it. I think it's pretty obvious. It's to continue this blood sacrifice to feed the lake. It's almost like Little Shop of Horrors, feed me Seymour, but a little bit more disturbing. But that's a pretty disturbing movie if you really think about it. Little Shop of Horrors, I watched it not too long ago. It still holds up pretty well, and the music's really good. All right. The next day, all right, so that was nighttime, right? Yeah. Now we're in the next day. Hilda is in the piano room. She's wiping sweat from her brow, tossing a bloody rag into a bucket of dirty water. She's inspecting the spotless floor and piano, so she cleaned up the crime scene. And she notices just a speck of blood on her fingertip. She sucks it clean, then calmly hums her Wraith's refrain. So it's kind of slow moving now. We're just following Hilda the day and night after she killed her father and twin sister. And later that night, she's in the piano room, sitting on the piano bench. It's all cleaned up now. And she's in this fancy dress. Maybe she stole it from Flora. And she's her hair is all neatly braided now. She looks like a completely different person, a different version of herself. She plays a more polished, extended version of her Wraith's refrain and writes a few more notations onto the sheet music. So she's still composing this like Wraith's refrain symphony or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what it's called when it's just a piano thing. I don't know. Is there a classical term for that I'm not thinking of? All right. But don't get it confused. I don't think she's not trying to be Flora. She's just a different person now ever since the lake claimed control of her soul in a way. All right. Now we are near the lake the next day. Hilda is floating on her back in the calm lake water, a crown of blue flowers around her head. Almost like a May Queen type of thing there. I was probably watching Midsummer, and I had these thoughts in my head. She's humming her Wraith's refrain, and then she shuts her eyes as Angus fishes nearby and spots her drifting towards him. Angus. Hilda. Or Hilda? He's kind of confused seeing her like this. She opens her eyes and levitates over the water towards him as he falls backwards in shock, then sprints down the shoreline. So, yeah, she's levitating over the water towards him, and he's just freaking the fuck out. He eventually stumbles and falls into the lake as ghostly arms reach out and drag him underwater. So now he becomes a part of the lake. He's another victim. Hilda watches him disappear beneath the calm water, then picks some flowers from her crown and tosses them into the lake, while calmly humming her Wraith's refrain. Back in the cottage that night, Hilda's in the piano room playing more of the Wraith's refrain. Alright, I'm not sure about this scene. I put a scene in here later in the night as we drift closer on Hilda's scarred face, and she's pleasuring herself as she's humming the Wraith's refrain. I think I put that in there because I wanted to show how she's a totally different person now. It's the connection to the Black Swan with Natalie Portman when she finally loses her shyness or whatever you want to call it, and she's fantasizing about Mila Kunis. It's similar to that scene. If it works, it works. If people don't want to include that in there, it's not a necessary part. But I think it just shows how Hilda was this sheltered type, and now she's just, it's the early 1900s, so you can't really show her going to a rave or taking drugs. She's in the middle of the Scottish countryside. So how do you show her joining the opposite of that, her former life? How do you really show that? So it's a scene I put in there to show that type of a response to this new entity controlling her. But again, if it's not going to work, then it's not going to work. Like, you don't have to show anything. You just kind of show her humming this thing as, you know, I'm not directing a porno movie here. You don't have to really show anything. But I think it is a good way to show how her character has changed so much. A little bit later, Hilda is staring into a corner wall, motionless, in another one of her deep trances, while Flora's ghost appears at the piano with a large bloody gash on her neck. So we're entering an important short scene here. Hilda is still in her weird, her body being possessed by a different entity. She's still in that state, and maybe this is to signify that this entity is forging a deeper connection, as Hilda just stares into a corner wall, not moving. But Flora's ghost now appears at the piano with a large bloody gash on her neck. So Flora does return in this movie as a ghost like that. Is it a ghost? Is it something that Hilda's just seeing? But I think it's because of their twin connection that I wrote the story like this. I didn't want to end Flora's story with just her sister killed her, and now that's the end, because I had a part two, and Flora is like the main character in part two of this, the ghost of Flora. So yeah, that's what I'm going for. I think it's far enough into this where it would make sense because of the twin connection. All right, so Hilda snaps out of her daze and turns towards her ghost of a sister as Flora's at the piano playing a C minor chord. There's a reason for that. I think it has to do with the part two of this story. So Hilda opens up her mouth as hundreds of black bugs shoot out and suck at Flora's flesh. Again, Flora is a ghost here, but what the fuck, it doesn't matter. Hilda is some demonic, witchy ancient spirit, so whatever, anything can happen. So even though Flora is a ghost in this type of moment, Hilda is still kind of like putting her to bed again. So with these black bugs, they disintegrate. Flora's flesh disintegrates into dust. So Hilda killed Flora as a human, and now she's putting her to rest as a ghost. All these bugs crawl back inside Hilda's mouth, almost like she's consuming her sister here, to keep her away from this her life now. So all these bugs crawl right back into Hilda's mouth, like it's a part of her body now, as Hilda grabs the kitchen knife from her pocket, and she starts to engrave something onto the side wall. Even later that night, Hilda's sleeping on the floor now, fast asleep, her arms and legs fully outstretched like a pentagram, with a large engraving of a triquetra symbol on the wall behind her. So she was taking all night to carve this large triquetra symbol that we've seen before. The next day in the piano room, Hilda is playing her Wraith's refrain, but then she pauses to write more notations onto the sheet music. She holds the sheet music up high, proud of her finally completed composition. She then packs the papers inside a small hidden compartment in one of the piano legs. Outside the cottage, Morrison is walking towards the front door, whistling a jolly melody. So maybe this is a week or so after these murders. Morrison's probably like, Layden hasn't been around, let me go check up on him. It's a small, very rural community, so there's probably not a lot of neighbors around these areas. They're kind of in a remote, wooded area here, so no one's going to go check up on anyone. And inside the piano room, Hilda's playing more of her Wraith's refrain. Morrison gazes through the window from outside the piano room and listens to Hilda's performance. Hilda senses someone watching her, pauses and turns towards him, Morrison. Hilda, she evils, so he's also kind of freaked out by her new gaze and her new look. She evil eyes him, not very happy with the interruption. Morrison, Light in here. Haven't been around in a few weeks, so it's even longer. Maybe this was 2 weeks after that murder happened, the double murder. They share some tense silence as Hilda continues to stare him down. Morrison, run off to the big city, has he? She walks towards him seductively and unbuttons her blouse as he watches, stunned. Morrison through nervous laughter. Or maybe out on a drinking campaign. She pulls him in closer and kisses him through the window as he shuts his eyes. He then opens them moments later just as she bites a chunk of flesh out of his cheek, sending him falling backwards in fright onto the dirt, where he pisses himself in fear and sprints away. All right. Now, through the countryside near the lake, Morrison is hightailing it on the shoreline as Hilda appears in a flash out of nowhere in front of him. His knees give out and he falls to the ground paralyzed. She then leaps on top of him, instantly grows long fingernails, and gouges his eyes out. We now drift high above the calm lake water, as all we hear are his agonizing screams echoing through the countryside. So yeah, Hilda's kind of an all-powerful witch now. She's got these ancient druid mystical qualities. She can appear and just transport herself like that. All right. At nighttime, Hilda's back in the piano room playing her Wraith's Refrain. At the same time, over the lake, we hear more demonic moans as Hilda's Wraith's Refrain echoes along the shore. And probably I would add that you see pieces of Morrison's body parts inside the lake. Like after Hilda's done with him, she's going to put him as a sacrifice to the lake. Like that type of an effect. All right, we're moving on now. Two young boys are walking towards the lake, and they're throwing rocks at this innocent little frog as they also chase it along the shore. It's superimposed as well, 1910. So we moved pretty quickly into the 1900s here. Hilda's now in her 40s. Her scarred face is now replaced by a fresh, large mole on her left cheek, like it grew back again. She gathers red berries off of a bush, just as one of the boys catches the frog, tosses it down, and stomps on it to death. She stares towards the boys, and these are young kids. They're probably like, 8 years old, 10 years old. She stares towards the boys as they giggle at her crazy, disheveled hair. And then she shuts her eyes, raises her arms over the water, and the sky begins to turn black. Hilda is now chanting in this ancient druid language, Siko Friko Vista Hoja, whatever the fuck you want to do there. The lake water turns red, boiling like lava again, while giant serpents reach out and pull the terrified young boys under. Hilda opens her eyes as the skies clear and the lake water returns to normal. She smiles to herself, calmly gathers more red berries from a bush, and hums her Wraith's Refrain. So she don't give a fuck. This lake, and through Hilda's human connection, yeah, they really don't care. Whatever victim they can find, they're gonna feed to the lake as a sacrifice. All right. Now we are in the piano room that night. Hilda's back on the piano bench playing her Wraith's Refrain. A bowl of fresh red berries on top of the piano. She then rises and dances joyously with herself around the room as she hums more of the melody to herself. Who knows, maybe she's conjuring other spirits from the lake Even though we don't see them in the room, they're all really there dancing to this music. Now we're going to move back to the lake. Hilda is now in her 50s, neatly braided white hair. She's washing her clothes in the water, kind of reminiscent of the other witches we saw earlier with the drooping breast down to their fucking knees. And the women that we saw before with Sawney, she's kind of becoming one of those witches like that. And so she's now in her 50s and she's down by the lake water washing her clothes as she hums her Wraith's refrain to herself. And it's now 1920, superimposed on the screen. A jolly old man fishes nearby in a small rowboat, whistling a cheerful melody to himself. As he inadvertently reels in a human leg, he jumps back in terror and tosses his fishing rod into the lake as Hilda levitates on the water towards him. He stares towards her in a daze as thousands of small black bugs crawl up his legs, fill up his boat, and restrain him as they all sink down below. All right, so we have another quick death scene there. Moving along, I think after that scene you can go back to the piano room and show Hilda playing her song again. Maybe it's like after every one of her sacrifices, she goes back and plays the song, or something to separate these, because now we're going... Yeah, I think you should add that. Right after that death scene of this innocent fisherman, you go back to the piano room and you just show Hilda playing at the piano again real quickly. And then that becomes 10 years later, so you kind of have a time cut. Outside the piano room, Teenage Boy 1 and Teenage Boy 2 are gazing through the window, trying to muster the courage to enter the window into the piano room. Superimposed at this point is 1930. These are three quick scenes to show the curse of Hilda continuing up until 1930 now. Teenage Boy 1 towards his friend. Knew you was a coward. Teenage Boy 2. Am no coward. No such thing as a witch. Teenage Boy 1. Go on then. Go on. So Teenage Boy 2 is now answering his friend's challenge as he crawls through the window, followed by his mate. As they enter the piano room, the two teenage boys scan the room nervously, then tiptoe towards the piano. They pause in fright as the piano plays Hilda's Wraith's refrain on its own. They eye each other and run for the window just as it slams down shut. They're now running towards the hallway as Hilda, now in her 60s, she's noticeably older. It's 10 years later. 3 vertical gashes painted in blood on her forehead, and she's blocking the path as these boys try to escape. She calmly runs her long fingernails through the boy's hair, then scrapes her tongue as blood drips down onto the floor and morphs into more little black bugs. Outside the cottage, we're drifting towards the peaceful stars as the panic screams of the 2 teenage boys echo below, followed moments later by Hilda's Wraith's refrain on the piano. So 2 more victims. I wanted to show this because, word would get around. Two other kids went missing 10 years ago. That's how these legends start. There must be a witch of the lake, the lady of the lake. That was how the legend evolved over the decades, over the centuries, up until Layden and Bridget. And now, as Hilda continues the curse, there's probably going to be more legends throughout the town. 2 small boys went missing. Nobody found their bodies by the lake. They must think it must have been the witch of the lake. And now these 2 teenage boys they're going to go missing. So throughout the town over the next couple of days and nights, they'll be like, oh, it must be the witch of the lake or that fisherman. Same thing. That's probably how these folklore legends start. They must come from somewhere. So I'm just showing these fast scenes because I didn't want to string this story out. I could have wrote another 30 pages showing all of the other victims of Hilda and what she was doing during this time period, but I didn't really go that route. I just wanted to show a couple scenes of how she handled this new identity of hers ever since the lake took control of her body. So I didn't really want to string it out for like 30 more pages. How many death scenes could you show and stuff like that? All right, moving on. We're on the top, we're on page 45. There's only like 2 pages left. All right. The next day after that, after she claimed those 2 teenage boys, Hilda is standing naked in the calm lake, holding a sharp stone. She gazes down into the water as hungry, demonic moans echo from the depths. She slices 3 vertical gashes into her wrist, and then she squeezes her blood out, shuts her eyes, and floats calmly on her back down the lake, trails of blood streaming on both sides of her. 2 male loggers chop wood nearby the shore and spot the grisly scene as she floats by them. So again, I guess the word is getting around town now, like, all right, remember that family? I think something's fucked up with the Hilda lady living in that house still. That was really the motivation for this. And also, I think maybe she's not able to find a lot of victims to appease the demons or whatever the fuck lives in this lake. So sometimes she does sacrifice her own blood, just like her ancestor did. Her ancestor did in the past. So that's kind of what that scene is showing, I think. A few nights later, there's a mob of about 10 men, and they're wielding rifles and flaming torches as they stare towards the front of the cottage, fear in their eyes as they march together. Hilda, at the same time, is playing her Wraith's Refrain on the piano in a fancy dress, her white hair neatly braided. The mob outside is setting fire to the cottage, just like Layden and Morrison did to that witch's shack, if I add that scene later. Because what do you do when there's a witch? It's always in folklore that you burn the witch. Burn the witch, that's the Radiohead song, right? All right, now Hilda's still in the piano room as the flames engulf the entire cottage, but she stays calm and plays her Wraith's Refrain like nothing is happening. Outside the cottage, storm clouds suddenly form in the dark sky, and heavy rain pours down over the burning cottage. Like, I'm sure it's not a great looking cottage. It's probably a couple 100 years old, or 100 years old at that point. So it probably burns up pretty quickly. And as these storm clouds are forming, Hilda just shoots right out the window like a missile and blows a powerful gust of wind towards the mob of men who desperately run for cover. So she's trying to fight back now against this mob out to kill her. A little bit later that night, over the lake, we're now going to go back to the very opening scene as Hilda in her 60s morphs into her 18-year-old self. So we witness this now. She morphs back to her 18-year-old appearance, and Hilda is levitating over the lake towards the middle of the lake. All around her are human arms and legs and torsos and feet as they float to the surface around her. The lake water swirls around her faster and faster, forming a whirlpool as fires suddenly erupt along the shore. An unseen force is now strangling Hilda's neck while she slowly sinks below. So is this the end of Hilda? Have the evil spirits below had enough of her, as they're now going to claim somebody else? All right, now we're back outside the cottage the next day. So that's kind of the closing scene. That's the scene I chose to open this entire movie with, as Hilda kind of reaches her climax. She returns to the lake of where her ancestors came from. And probably not by her own choice, but she's kind of ever since she was 18 and she had that moment, the lake was in control of her. So it's kind of like she never got to live her life really from her real identity. Whoever she turned into after the lake claimed her, it wasn't really her. It was some other entity kind of taking control of her. But they were able to use her for the next 40 years or so. So that's why she turns back to her 18-year-old self, because that's what she really was before all this shit went down. So they're almost like she's becoming a sacrifice to the lake as well, in a way. All right, moving on. The next morning, the sun is rising over the tattered cottage roof, which is very badly damaged from the fire and storm. Inside the piano room, we're drifting through water and fire damage, passing leaves, branches, debris, blackened walls, and we view the triquetra symbol, the engraving that's also partially faded at this point. The piano shows some damage, but remains in one piece. As we drift closer to it, and we notice the piano's hidden leg compartment. So in the piano leg, it's like a little box where you could put stuff, like a hidden compartment, where the only vestige of Hilda's cursed composition rests hidden inside. So that's where she put like her composition, her music notations all went inside the piano leg. And now we're outside the lake again as early morning sunlight shines on the calm water as a somber waltz plays from the piano. We move back to the piano room again, and we notice a figure playing this waltz from the piano bench. And as we get closer, we notice it's Flora, because we notice the bloody gash across her throat as she sits on the piano bench and plays more of the somber waltz. That's the end. I would end this, like I said, with Sparrow in the Workshop, a song called Over the Water, because it's kind of a haunting type of psychedelic song. All right. Is anything not clear? I think I've explained everything to death, really, about the themes of this and where I was going in my head. The last shot of Flora playing the piano, the ghost of Flora, because I guess her spirit was never given justice, or she was never put to rest properly, so her spirit is forever to haunt this piano or haunt this area. And I kind of like that. It becomes a ghost story too, in a way. And as we move to the second part of the story, Flora is the main character. As we move forward, you'll see where I'm going. Part 2 is like a ghost story, but it's also kind of a nod to Final Destination. Even though I'm not a huge fan of that franchise, and I've only seen maybe the first one, I think. When I was writing it, I had that movie in my head, Final Destination. So part 2 is going to be a totally different experience. This one gets pretty dark. I don't really know what else to talk about in terms of the type of a folklore elements I'm trying to put in this. I feel like I've explained everything like way more than I even should have, but to somebody who wants to make this movie, I guess you have to know all these things. You don't want to be left guessing what I'm going for. And yeah, if a director wanted to write this, a production company bought this movie, they would want to know all these little details. I'm different. I'm not the writer and director, so there's no way I would ever direct a movie. I have to put all these thoughts out there and see what people think of them to see if it works. If people share a similar vision, I think it's a really cool story because of the sibling rivalry, especially with twin sisters. There's the Scottish part of it, which makes it creepier. And all these other witches throughout the movie kind of add to that sentiment. The only thing I'm thinking is maybe I could stretch it out a little bit longer, another 4 pages, showing more of when Hilda first encounters this spirit of the lake, this evil force is taking control of her body. I might be convinced to add more pages there, more scenes, to show her change, because maybe the death scenes come a little bit too quickly when she kills Flora right away, and then she kills Layden like the same night or the next day. I might be convinced to extend that, but maybe not to. I think it works the way I had it. She encounters this evil spirit, and then she goes back home, and that's when the story gets really dark. And she's just sitting alone at the kitchen table, holding the knife. As the night goes, she barely moves an inch. Layden comes back, eats dinner, and then goes back out, or whatever time it was. And then the killing starts right after that. So I think it works from that type of a perspective. If she was really consumed by this evil force, then really, why would the evil force wait any longer? It's just going to start killing people. So I think it makes sense like that. And I kind of feel that's the main theme. Maybe if Hilda was in a different position, she could have fought it off and the evil spirit would have left her eventually. But I think at that point of her life, she was just vulnerable to it because of how maybe people treated her and shit. So she was kind of vulnerable to that type of a demonic possession, whatever you want to call it. So I think I handled it as best as I could. If it was really like that, she was claimed by this evil force because she did have a connection to it because of Bridget's ancestry and all that stuff. It kind of makes sense that the lake would be looking for her to claim her and to use her for whatever purpose they have to continue this kind of reign of terror like that. Because that's what folklore is, right? That's how you scare your kids with Hansel and Gretel and all these other stories, grim fairy tales or Bible stories about brimstone and hellfire. You're trying to scare people, or it's a form of propaganda. When I was looking at the Sawney Bean story earlier, I listened to that podcast with like real authentic Scottish people with real Scottish accents, not like the one I'm trying to portray, but I can't do accents. I'm from England. What's that from? Like Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And these two podcast hosts, they were talking about the Sawney Bean thing, like it was accepted as truth. But then I looked it up more, and people were like on Reddit talking about Sawney Bean. It's just a story that certain people used as propaganda for political reasons in the United Kingdom of that period. And then other people were saying it's based on a different person who had a similar cannibal legacy. So I'm not even sure if it's true, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Truth or not, it's a great bit of Scottish folklore that there was a cannibal living in a cave, picking off people, travelers, and eating them. you know, whether it's a true story or not, I don't really care. It's just a good story. And it led to a lot of the themes on my own story. So, yeah, I'm grateful to have found that. Sawney Bean, thank you for your clan of cannibals. Thank you. And I'll go back to what I said in the first one. If you're going to write a story to try to shock people and disturb people, then you got to go all in on it. And this is about as disturbing as I can get, where a sister would kill her twin sister and then kill her father and then become this witchy woman that kills children and kills teenagers just as sacrifice to this whatever entity lays below the lake that was cursed all those centuries ago. It works on that level because it just does. You don't really need an explanation at that point. You're not trying to figure out why Hilda all of a sudden started killing people. It's a pretty easy explanation because it's not really her at that point. And you could say it's the curse of her family ancestry. You could point to that as well. Her father even says it, that I knew you go the way of the dark. Like he kind of knew that there was something within her that would one day come out as kind of a dark side like that. So he was almost like, maybe that's why he kind of was so hard on her, because he didn't know what to do to protect the family from her or some shit. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up at this point. I never really thought about these stories this in detail, like, but that's a logical explanation. Or he was just a drunken asshole, and that's just how he formed his relationships. I don't know. But I think the story really does work. The only hesitance I have is some of the dialogue, to make sure that it makes sense in this time period, to make sure that it fits the Scottish language. Because I don't know. Hopefully it's not too far off, because I don't want to be that type of a writer who doesn't put the time in. But what do I really do to find out how people spoke in Scotland in 1880? Who do I even talk to about that? So I would have to rely on a different editing later on as this is cast and the director comes aboard. I'm going through the process in my head right now. And as you cast this movie and find actors that are really maybe have that Scottish legacy or heritage, maybe they can help out. Or you could get consultants to kind of see how people spoke in Scotland back then. It's not that abnormal to do stuff like that. When people write mob movies, they usually get people who have some knowledge of the mafia, or was a part of it, or some kind of knowledge like that, or FBI would get involved to kind of show what's realistic and what's not. So yeah, that's all I really would hope to obtain, so I can be as accurate as possible. And that's my main concern. I think the story is all there. The story is all there. The scenes work. There's the darkness throughout. There's more action in this one than Everything is Free. Everything is Free kind of waited to the last third act, the last act, to really develop the psychological horror. But this one kind of starts out like that. It doesn't really hold anything back. It's a little bit slow moving at parts, but even in those slow moving parts, there's still witches, conversations with these old, disgusting looking witches and stuff like that. It's good for horror movies. So yeah, I still like this story. I don't think it's a crazy production, although there are some moments that would need special effects or CGI. That's also a part of this one. You have this blood storm that burns through these Romans or English soldiers in one scene, and you have Hilda darting out the window like she's flying, and then she's levitating over the lake as all these body parts are submerging from underneath the lake. So you really have to make these striking visuals like a video game again. You could almost turn this into a video game. Speaking of that, some of the most memorable video games I played were like Resident Evil and stuff like that as a kid. That really does kind of jump scare you at times. So, yeah, that's my tribute to Scottish folklore. Hopefully, someone will want to make this a reality. It could be, again, these are all episodes for my series, but there's plenty of wiggle room. It's only 47 pages, but if you really wanted to make this a feature and get it around 80, 90 pages, I don't think it would be that difficult because the story's there. Adding scenes to it, you would just try to maybe fix the tempo or stretch some of those scenes out, put some more creepy moments of how this curse started and how it developed in the beginning. Maybe add a little bit more of the relationships between these twins and the father once the mother dies. There's plenty of room for additions here because it's only 47 pages. But I still feel like I write in a minimal fashion. A lot of these scenes could be stretched out. So even if it's only a page or so, it could be extended into like a 5-minute scene because you want to build the atmosphere. And I hate to go back to Halloween again because I always go back to that, but go watch Halloween. It's such a slow moving movie, but it works because it's building up to this epic ending with this crazy psycho rampaging through the suburbs. So yeah, there's so much room in horror, especially more than any other genre, for just building the creepy ambient textures. And that's what a movie like this would promote. You would need that type of element throughout this. If it becomes an hour or if it's longer than that, you would need that element definitely. And because of the music, the Wraith's Refrain, there's so much potential to include moments like that. More moments over the lake, more moments with other victims of the lake. It's almost like the curse of the lake was dormant or kept at bay, but over the years, well, once Hilda got involved, then everything changed. She became the personification of this cursed lake in a human form, just like other ones in the past. But the lake kind of uses people for different purposes. And after I wrote this, I did write this entire story in like 20 pages. And then I had to really stretch it out more to get to 47 because originally this episode was going to be part 1 and part 2, but it just didn't work. It's totally different tones and storylines that didn't make sense. The next one is a horror, part 2, and it continues this curse, but it's made like a modern horror movie, not based on this old folklore witchy stuff. It's much different. There's still elements of this. There's still elements of the witchcraft, and as we follow Hilda and Flora and the curse of the piano moving to the United States across the pond. But it's completely different storyline that it just didn't fit well in a movie like this. You had to make it a 2-part type of an experience to make it work. So that's where I'm at with this now. I believe I'll get through part 2 pretty quickly, because it's an easier read than this one. This one kind of gave me difficulty reading through some of these scenes, not because they're kind of disturbing, but maybe the wording was too, it wasn't as clear as I should have made it in a lot of these scenes. I was kind of editing things on the fly as I was reading through this to try to make it, to be able to explain it to people better. Because if people actually listen to this, I want it to be as clear as possible. But the first part was really more obnoxious because I had to kind of go through the druid thing with the Romans, and then as we followed the curse from that time until the 1800s. So yeah, if this was purchased by a production company, but they said, we like the story, but we want it to be a feature, you got to add 20 more pages to it, you could do it pretty easily. Even that one scene that I just thought of, showing Morrison and Layden burning down the witch's shack and stealing the piano from those old witches, which I'm sure that's a reason as well. I think that scene is necessary now because it shows they burnt this witch's shack and took their fucking piano and killed these 3 old witches. That's probably the reason why this piano is so cursed and affected Hilda like that. The piano was just like the lake looking for somebody to corrupt, and they found Hilda as a vulnerable candidate, and Flora just didn't have that type of character to be able to harness that evil inside of her. So yeah, that's what I was going for. I think you need to add that scene. You would show this fairly short scene of Layden and Morrison before they bring the piano home. They go to that witch's shack, they burn it down, and they block the door so the witches burn inside. And then they go in before it completely burns, and they take the piano out. And as they're doing that, one of the witches reaches out for them with their like long fingernails, and then either Layden or Morrison cuts her hand off with an axe, just to add to the creepiness, to build on the lore of this cursed piano and this cursed lake, all the witchy stuff that goes on in this area. I would love to have discussions with Scottish people to see if they could add more personal stuff, because I don't know anything really. I can just read stories about Sawney Bean and other elements of witchcraft in Scotland and stuff like that has been passed down over the years. And I can read about it and watch YouTube videos about it, but to really have first-hand account and to have other real Scottish people who live in Scotland to give their opinions of how this story works and how it doesn't work, what's realistic in the dialogue and what doesn't work at all for them, because they, of course, I respect their opinion more than my own. If I was setting this story in New Jersey, then I wouldn't be as afraid because I've lived in New Jersey. I know how people speak. Maybe I don't know how people spoke in the 1800s. That definitely makes it more difficult to write the dialogue, but you could still figure that out based on other movies or other books, or there's not really first-hand accounts of that, but whatever. I think I did a fairly good job. Is it completely polished to the point where I could show this script to like Scottish people and they'd be like happy with the dialogue? I'm fairly confident to say yes, but again, everyone's going to be different too. But I'm pretty confident in what I came up with. It was one of the harder scripts to write, but I would usually write this in the dark at night to really increase the creepiness. I said in the first part, it's not like I ever want to really experience pagan rituals or be a part of this shit. I don't even know if I would go to Burning Man because I feel like Burning Man is some kind of a return to ancient pagan rituals of the Wicker Man, but instead of burning a real human being, you're just using an effigy and kind of releasing all the frustrations of that past year and just forging a new path. Because that's kind of what a lot of those rituals are meant to do. You're burning the parts of yourself that you don't want to be a part of yourself anymore. Or, I don't know, I might just be making shit up completely. If I look that up, is that going to give me anything symbolic, or is it just going to say Burning Man's a chance for people to get fucked up, take psychedelics, and have orgies? Or is it something deeper? What is the meaning of the Burning Man festival? Because it does, to be honest, it looks like a good time. Maybe if I went in my 20s, I would have a better experience. What is the meaning? But now in my 40s, it might just be a waste of time. What is the meaning of the Burning Man festival? And it's been going on for at least a couple decades. It's in Nevada's Black Rock Desert. It's a week-long event focused on community art, self-expression, radical self-reliance. So 80,000 people go to this desert site, just take psychedelics. That's what I always thought it was. And there's a leave no trace attitude, culminating in the burning of a large wooden effigy right near Reno, Nevada. So they burn this effigy of the man, and they burn the temple, whatever, they create some temple. I don't know. There are no spectators, only participants. All right, attendees are expected to contribute to the city, whether through art, volunteering, or other experiences. It's a harsh, remote environment in the high desert, and participants have to bring all their food, water, and shelter. So it's a pretty big deal to do something like that. It started in 1986. But there's got to be some connection to the symbolic reason why these ancient pagan communities would actually burn like human sacrifices. It's kind of to appease the gods and to, like, I don't know, because I can't speak to it because I don't really know the meaning. And I'm sure each one's different. The Aztecs would burn people or take their hearts out and sacrifice them. But why did certain tribes practice human sacrifice? Like, is it just simple as appeasing the gods? Why did certain tribes practice human sacrifice? For a better harvest? Was that the symbolic nature of it? To appease the deities, maintain cosmic order, and uphold social control. It was often viewed as a necessary high-value offering to prevent natural disasters, ensure agricultural success, or pay a spiritual debt to gods. So, yeah, it's all that usual stuff. I guess, yeah, like I was talking about the Aztecs, I'm sure it was all poor people. A way to keep people on their toes. Or that movie Midsummer, based on a lottery, is just random. They decide who to kill every year. But yeah, I guess every culture did it differently too. Human sacrifice served as a display of power by elites. Now you're getting into the Illuminati shit. Economic and religious debt. The Aztecs believed they owed a constant constant debt of blood for their own existence. All right, that's perfect. These blood rituals, it's the same thing I'm trying to portray in this story of this lake. It has to constantly be fed blood and kept at bay, or weird shit's gonna happen. I kind of can relate that to this story now, yeah. Because and when I first started writing this story, it's not like I really knew what I was writing yet. It took almost the duration of the entire thing to kind of form a more balanced explanation about everything. And I'm still trying to figure things out as I speak about it today. And this is 5 years after I wrote this. That's just how a story like this comes together. Part two is going to be way more basic than this. And I think that's a good thing. This one was a lot of stuff packed into 47 pages. Maybe the most information that I've had to look up and speak about, because I'm dealing with a different country and different appreciation of folklore in Scotland, in the UK in general. It's maybe there's some similarities to the culture I grew up with in America, in New Jersey, and in the European type of Italian type of folklore. But really, the only folklore I got as a kid was through the Bible. That's what I kind of view as folklore. There's stories in the Bible that could be like a Grimm fairy tale. There's stories in Grimm's fairy tales that could be in the Bible. Hansel and Gretel could be a Bible story. This story is kind of connected to Cain and Abel. That's like one of the first stories you learn in Bible school. Probably you learn about Cain and Abel. And am I my brother's keeper? That might be like the most overused cliche line in movies from the Bible. Is that in Pulp Fiction too? Yeah, I think so. Am I my brother's keeper? I think that's in Pulp Fiction. I actually had a weird dream last night, and I don't like talking about dreams because they're usually stupid. Nobody wants to know your dreams. But I had a dream about Pulp Fiction that I was watching it. It was very weird, actually. Pulp Fiction. Am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's keeper? Jules Winfield, blah blah blah, recites a modified version of Ezekiel, declaring, "And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger, and you will know I am the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon you." This speech highlights the brother's keeper's role in protecting the weak. So yeah, it is kind of related to it. Yeah, so I had a dream about Pulp Fiction last night. It was very weird. When I woke up this morning, that's all I was thinking about. That I had this dream that the real Pulp Fiction was like a movie no one ever saw before, and I was the only one seeing it. I was seeing the true version of it, and I don't remember it, so don't ask me. I wish I did remember it. I should have wrote this down earlier. But yeah, it was very odd. But yeah, I guess I'm gonna end it here. Once I start mentioning my dreams, then I'm really out of shit to talk about. So I'll end this here. Tomorrow is gonna be. I might do this tomorrow, or I might take a day off tomorrow and not do this, depending on how the platelets go. I'm donating platelets. If I come back and I feel like doing it, then I'll do it, or I'll just wait till Sunday or Monday. But part two is a lot more easy to get through. If you had trouble listening to this one, I apologize. I was trying to explain these things to myself. Hopefully, I don't come off as really, really stupid. Like, I don't mind if I come off as stupid, but I don't want to be seen as really stupid. Just a bit of stupidity is fine. But I think I explained everything even more than I probably had to. But my concern is getting my thoughts out as clearly as possible. And I don't know if I achieve that. Hopefully to some level, somebody could listen to this one day and be like, hey, that sounds like a cool movie. It's got the Scotland connection. It's got this folklore of this fucking lake. And maybe there's people that will have things to add to this. Like, well, there's another story about this lake in, I don't know, China or Russia or Turkey. And there's this similar story about this curse that, and then more stories will develop. Maybe you can add stuff like that. When it comes to American folklore, I don't have much to offer. New Jersey has the New Jersey Devil, but I never really took that seriously. Maybe if I lived in Scotland, I'd make a story about the Jersey Devil, because I don't know what the hell it is. But because I live in New Jersey, I want to write a story about Scotland, because it seems more exotic. If I lived in Scotland, I'd be like, I'm not going to write a stupid story about Sawney Bean or include that type of a plot line because it's so stupid. It's just propaganda, man. So yeah, that's where my head's at. What is the origin of the Jersey Devil? Because now I'm curious myself. I've lived in New Jersey for most of my life. I don't even know what the origin of it is. What is the origin of the fucking Jersey Devil? The devil. The Jersey Devil originated back in 1735 from a folktale about Mother Leeds, a Pine Barren resident who cursed her 13th child, crying, "Let the child be the devil." The baby was born normal, but immediately transformed into a creature with wings, a horse-like head, hooves, and a tail, which then flew up the chimney to inhabit the pine lands. All right, that's pretty cool. So this mother was tired of giving birth, I guess. By the 13th baby, she's like, fuck this. I'm tired of giving birth to these fucking kids. Let this child be the devil. And bam, that's how the Jersey Devil got created. It's a good bit of folklore. That's not that bad. Mother Leeds, it just sounds so fucking commonly known as Mother Leeds of Burlington. Ah, cool, man. I live in Burlington County right now. The Jersey Devil. Some accounts suggest that the story was a political smear campaign against the Leeds family, led by Benjamin Franklin. What the fuck? Is this really true? Or it's rooted in Native American folklore? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just like Ring Around the Rosie, people can just make up whatever they want. But I'm not saying which one's true or not. They all could be true, and none of them could be true. It's just a way to get information out there. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah, it's similar to the Satanic Panic, where people make stories like this for various reasons. That's why I wrote the movie Jailbreak, to create that as well. To go down that theme of media hype and hysteria. That's the show with Julie Bowen that dealt with that on Peacock. It was pretty good. It dealt exactly with 1980s satanic panic throughout American suburbs. The Jersey Devil, there was a surge of sightings in 1909 which created mass hysteria, where it was blamed for attacks on poultry and strange footprints. So who knows, man? What if people use these things as an excuse to do vandalism or more nefarious shit, where you can go murder your enemy and say, oh, it was a Jersey Devil, man. Maybe that's what the witchcraft was, the Salem witch trials. They just wanted to get rid of some people, like some conspiracy like that. But it's not that out of the ordinary that people will blame, or not even blame, but they'll use folklore and manipulate events and blame it on the folklore, just like people blame things on heavy metal music or violent video games. But I've never heard this story until now, and I've lived in New Jersey my entire life. So, yeah, I'm interested in folklore, but not to that degree. Like, people who are really interested in this will go to where there's reports of the Jersey Devil and, like, stay out all night and try to find it. And, like, the people who were in the Blair Witch Project. That's not me. I'm not really going to put any of my real life energy into any of this shit, because it's interesting, but I don't really believe in any of this. The Jersey Devil, even the pictures of it is kind of cute and funny looking. And there's one that says the Leeds Devil. It's like a tabloid in the newspaper, captured Friday. After a terrific struggle. I don't know. I'm looking at old, I don't know if these are newspaper clippings of what people think the New Jersey Devil looks like. But that's pretty cool. At least they got a cool hockey team name from it. I don't think there's any other sports franchises named the Devils besides New Jersey hockey team. So that's cool. That's a cool outcome of folklore. There's like, yeah, that's like the only one I could think of. Even college sports. The Duke Blue Devils. Yeah. You got Duke Blue Devils. And what's UNLV? Like something weird? UNLV mascot. It kind of looks like a devil. Yeah, it's just a rebel. UNLV does not have official costume, but their nickname is the Rebels. I thought it was like the Red Devils or something like that. But professional sports, I think New Jersey's the only one. What sports teams? All right, this is the last thing I'm going to look up today. What sports teams are named after the Devils besides Duke in New Jersey? I can't really think of anyone else. Well, of course, New Jersey. Well, Red Devils, Tampa Bay Devil Rays. All right, I forgot about that one. Manchester United are the Red Devils? I didn't know that. Well, you got Duke Blue Devils. But really, there's not many. All right, Arizona State. I like that team, actually. I like Arizona State. They use the name the Sun Devils. That's a good name. But there's not too many like that. All right, I think I'm going to end it here. I can't really think of anything else to add to this. Hopefully, I connected the dots for enough people. And stay tuned for part 2. It gets a little bit more comedic and more of a love story, and we're heading into modern day instead of these ancient times. It's more creepy to me when you have a witchcraft story take place in the woods in the 1800s. It doesn't make it as scary if it's the same story, but if it takes place in 2020 or today, or even in the 1990s, like it's not as scary, because culture today kind of glosses over that shit. Any type of wicked folklore and witchcraft, it just doesn't have the appeal anymore. It's just whatever. Oh yeah, I saw that movie. But to really have a cursed type of experience, it's much creepier to set it in the 1800s when people either really believed in that shit or it was just more apparent. Yeah, I think that's why it makes it creepier. So hopefully I accomplished that. But tomorrow or the next day, I'm going to read through part two, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's a lot different, much different of a story. And even though the characters will remain, Hilda and Flora will show up in the next part, it's a completely new world that I'm creating. And I'll leave it there.